I'm Molly Smith Metzler, and you're listening to In Her Words.
Everyone has a story. Welcome to In Her Words, a podcast from women in entertainment where female creatives and allies share their stories in their own words.
This is a dedicated space centered on how to harness creativity for inspiring and impactful projects in the ever-changing landscape of entertainment.
I'm Renee Rossi,
I'm Gretchen McCourt.
and this is In Her Words.
Today, we're talking to Molly Smith Metzler. Molly has an upcoming series, SIRENS, coming out on May 22nd on Netflix. She is also the writer and creator of Netflix's successful series, Maid. She's been a writer on Shameless, Orange is the New Black. Today, we talk about her transition from playwright to television, and we talk about her new series and her love for female protagonists and really diving into her characters. We hope you enjoy. You have so many things going on. I was doing so much background reading on you, and you are so accomplished. We're so excited to have you. It's like with your new series, Sirens, premiering.
I know.
So exciting.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here too. I'm a big fan.
So, Molly, I guess, can we start back at the beginning? It's like, I know you're a Juilliard graduate, but can we, in terms of, in your words, just in terms of how you started, did you always know you wanted to be a writer? Just thinking back on your childhood.
Oh, we're going back.
Go back.
I, I, I always wrote and I always read, but I didn't know I'd necessarily be a creative writer. I was sort of a nerd. Like I loved writing essays in college. I thought I would go on and get a PhD in comp lit. But then when I was a senior in college, I went to a wonderful state school, SUNY Geneseo, which is in Western New York. Near Buffalo, which is how I know Buffalo so well. But I kind of on a whim took an introduction to playwriting class. And I remember our homework assignment was to go home and write a scene between two characters that had conflict. And, I was very sweet and very well behaved all the time. And so it was wonderful for me to kind of write this angry, tons of conflict scene. And I found, I found that it really came easily to me, like people being in conflict, dramatic writing. I had a well of things I wanted to say. And so that very night I ended up staying up all night writing the scene. And then the next morning I was like, well, I need to study this for a living. So I started to change my plan from comp lit and started writing plays. And then I spent the next 10 years waitressing and studying playwriting.
That's amazing. Do you find, obviously you've made that switch to television, but the difference in writing from being a playwright to writing TV. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of I think you've been pretty public in terms of just talking about your transition itself, but just in terms of the actual tactic.
Well, playwriting is the best foundation for television writing and also specifically for show running. Because when you're a playwright, I always say, like, I'm way too social to be a writer. I could never be alone in the tower all day. Writing is very social. I mean, you do the writing part, but then it's a huge collaboration. And if you're lucky, you're in rehearsal with, incredible actors and designers and director, and they're all bringing the thing to life. And you get used to working as a group. And you do have to sort of make the final decisions about what goes in the play and what doesn't. But you really cut your teeth working as a team. So it's
Yeah.
great preparation for television. But then also, I think most playwrights, we have a sort of economy with money. We just have an economy in general. Like when you write a play, like my play Element of P that my show is based on, it happens in one room with 5 characters and in real time in 90 minutes. And so, you learn how to do things that are really just about character because you don't have a lot of other tools. You can't suddenly go to Mars. You can't, you can't bring a character on to just deliver a drink and then bring them off and never pay them off. Like it's very economical. And so that serves you very well on television too, that you're always thinking about character first.
Yeah. In terms of just, Elemental P to screen, what's that process been like into Siren?
Well, it's funny because the show I did, Maid, is based on this award-winning memoir, which is a fantastic piece of literature. And so when I adapted that, I felt, an obligation and to honor as much of the book and the brilliance of the book as I could. But adapting my own play was like the opposite. I mean, I felt like I wasn't precious at all. I threw big chunks of it away, and also, I saw it very much as sort of a jumping off point. I love the 5 characters that are in the play. It's the 3 women, Devin, Michaela, Simone, Ethan, and Jose, and that's all the play is. And I loved those 5 characters, but we hear so much about the world. We hear so much about Peter Kell. So I was able to spend the entire weekend with with these characters and blow out all the walls. So we see the world. We meet Peter, who has the ultimate power. So it was very freeing to adapt because I was like, well, who wrote this? I don't care.
In terms of LMNOP, you wrote that back in 2014. Is that right? Did I get that date right?
Yes.
So how was that like to pick it up, over a decade later in terms of bringing it to the screen?
It was thematically very relevant because I think in a lot of ways the show and the play are about innocence and experience. We watch Simone grow from child, I think girls and women over the weekend. And so I don't know, when I wrote the play, I didn't know that much about the world yet. And so to go back and look at it again at 47, um, and also how much the world has changed since
Yeah.
I wrote the play. And it felt like a better time for the play, to tell you the truth. It's about class and what we owe the people that are in our family, where we come from, you know, uh, power, ambition, sort of about these things that made a lot more sense now than they did when I was a student at Juilliard.
I think with LMNOP, I read a little bit that it was based on your experiences on Martha's Vineyard of waitressing there. As you kind of build out the story and bring more characterization, do you find your memories like stand up? Are you, in terms of as you start revisiting kind of that summer or, your experiences, especially kind of now you're in a different place, like 10 years later, as you're saying, the world is different. Like, do you find revisiting your own story and how to honor your own story within that or what you've seen in that? Um, like what has that journey been like for you?
So the summer I spent in Martha's Vineyard, I was fresh out of college, and I don't actually know what took me to Martha's Vineyard except this instinctual feeling that I should go there, which is funny. But I didn't know anyone there. I was 22 years old. I had $500 that I'd made, from my college job, and I spent it all on a ferry ticket. And I got a job working at this unbelievably exclusive yacht club in Martha's Vineyard. And I don't come from money. I was a scholarship kid. I did not know that level of wealth existed. And I remember when I got off the ferry and was just sort of like felt like I was in another planet. But also at the yacht club, there was this sort of specific group of wives. And there's something so tribal about them. And
Interesting.
they all dress so
I love that
similarly.
word.
Yeah, yeah, like they're,
You run into these tribes
I know. And they
throughout your life in different ways.
Yeah, and they also dress so similarly, shopped at all the same stores and had these pastels. And not to generalize because there were exceptions, but I found them to be like a pretty oppressive presence. They are very powerful, but then I actually did get to know a couple of them over the summer, and one of them, one of the most beautiful and most wealthy, um, had a savage divorce by the end of the summer, and I watched her disappear from power. And I watched how the other women responded to it. And I realized there's a lot of ferocity to that world, actually. And, these powerful women, they have a certain currency because of their husbands, but their own value is something that was very much in flux all the time. And anyway, they were fascinating. I watched them all summer, babysat for some of them, got to know some of them. And then 10 years later, when I was at Juilliard, I found that I was still thinking about them. And now, 10 years after that, I'm still thinking about them. But I think part of it is how the memories are very vivid for me because I felt like I was encountering alien culture.
Yeah.
Also, they spend all day on the yachts and come in with their gimlets and they, it looks fantastic. I mean, that kind of wealth, it is a cult. It's a cult you want to be in. And it's so alluring and sparkling. Even the air is different. The sun shines brighter. I understood why people kill themselves to get into that kind of wealthy strata in this country.
Yeah. And you're exploring that in Siren. Good transition into the plot and talk a little bit about the story. Do you want to just give an overview for our audience in terms of the story? As I know we're I believe dropping this prior. So
Oh, okay, great. So Sirens is about Labor Day weekend. The whole thing happens in one weekend on an exclusive island, much like Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard. And it's about two sisters. The younger sister started working as a personal assistant to a trophy wife on the island. And since taking that job, she's really gone incommunicado. And her older sister, Devin, who is in Buffalo and is really down on her luck and having a bit of an emotional breakdown herself, comes to the island to find her sister and to say, "What is going on? Why haven't I heard from you?" And when she gets there, she's very alarmed by what she finds, specifically her sister's relationship with her boss, who's played by Julianne Moore. And it kind of hits the fan from there.
Like this is one of Netflix's one of their most anticipated series, or mini. It's a mini series. What was it like to kind of have this cast come together? Was it surreal? It's like the cast, the story, anticipation. Is it just surprising? Does it take you aside? Or are you like, this is, like, how did you go about, how are you approaching the series right
I'm walking around excited because I have the secret, which is that I know how fantastic the performances are. Like everyone is in for such a treat. I mean, across the board, Megan Fahey, who was the hardest to cast because I mean, actually she was easy to cast, but the role of Devon is hard to cast. And she's sarcastic, she's mean, she's hard to like, but she's also so funny and needs help and is full of love. And when we found Megan, I remember thinking, she's never done anything like this before. Um, I didn't really know she could do that. It's so exciting to see her
now?
on a roll like this. So anyway, I'm walking around with this little secret that I'm like, everyone's performances are going to blow your mind. Julie is as powerful and icy and incredible as you expect her to be. Millie Alcock, I mean, star on the rise, nails this unbelievably hard part, I think, with such grace and ease. And Kevin is a delight. Felix is a delight. Bill's a delight. They're all just, I think, top of show. So I'm just walking around excited for you all to see it.
We're excited. Over your career, you've always gravitated towards the female protagonists, these really interesting women. Can you talk a little bit about, just your drivers as you pick projects, as you write projects, as, whether it be, from Shameless to Orange is the New Black, some of your plays, things along those lines, like you're very grounded in the female protagonist.
Thank you. I a show like Shameless is a great example because, of course, we write for all the characters, and so I can write for men. I really like writing for men. I loved writing for Bill Macy, for many years. But I definitely like pushing a female protagonist, and I think well, here's what I like to do. I like to think of an actor like Julianne Moore or Megan Fahey or Millie Alcock, and I like to challenge them and give them something really hard and like push it further and dig
Yeah.
deeper and then get to work with them on it. So I think there's something about I like pushing female characters to places that are uncomfortable that we haven't seen before. And I like to challenge myself. I like to write a lot of women, so every time I find a new one that I want to write about, I I make it harder for myself. I challenge myself more. These women are very hard to write, and I'm interested in them. I'm interested in women. Just dating back to being the waitress at the yacht club, I was interested in those women. I had a lot
Yeah.
of, so I kind of view writing them as an inquiry.
Going back to, kind of like just looking at Maid, because I think that we have to talk about Maid a little bit too, is just, that is such a complex story, and bringing that to life too. How, where did it come from, or what was, you pitched it, you created it. What was that process like for you at Netflix? And, what was your discovery of the biography, and going through that process of saying, I want to make this.
Well, first, I got extraordinarily lucky because I was working on Shameless at the time. So I was in John Wells' writer's room, which is the most fun job I've ever had. Shameless. But John and Margot Robbie had come together to get this book made. And I think that, honest to God, they were having a meeting about what female writer to bring it to. And, we need a playwright. We need someone who could really get into
Yeah.
characters. And I was sort of sitting in his room, and my play, Cry It Out, had just opened in LA, and people were seeing it. Everyone in the office had just seen it. And so, I mean, truly, they were like, I was just sitting right there. And I think John saw something in me before I saw it in myself, and I'm forever grateful to him. But he sent me home with the book. And I remember, my husband and I read it over the weekend. We're like, this will make a terrible TV show. Let's do it. This is, but and then from there, this does not happen often, but I just had a vision for it. It came clear as day to me, and I was like, I'm the only person who can write this. This is what it is. And that kind of certainty, when you get that kind of certainty, you have to listen to it, because it almost never happens. But I just saw Maid, I saw the way in, I saw how to expand it from the book. Um, and so yeah, I answered the call. So then John and Margot and I, we took it out with Lucky Chap, Margot's company, and we we sold it off the pitch. So what was wonderful about that is that doesn't happen very much either. But then I had the full confidence of Netflix behind me when I sat down to write that pilot, which was like thrilling because I knew we were going to make it. So I felt like what a huge vote of confidence. And we got a wonderful writers' room together, and we were halfway through the writing process when COVID hit, which is its own probably separate question, but but yeah, it was unbelievably exciting and blessed launch.
What was, you had mentioned it before in one of our earlier questions, but what was the responsibility you felt going in terms of bringing that to screen, right? And adapting somebody else's.
Well, Stephanie's story upset me. It, it's so beautiful, um, and it's so painful, but it's also an education. You learn a lot reading it. So I think one of the things that off the top, I was like, we have to figure out how to make this really entertaining and personal and emotional so that people go on the ride. But I kept talking about we have to shake the NPR off of it. Like we have to shake the sense that it's an education, or that you're learning something. We have to shake that off of the story. But then at the end, people can realize that they've actually just taken a 10-hour course on what it is to live below the poverty level in this country. So it was really important to get all those details right, and also to update them because the book came out and then the show came out a few years later, and so some of those laws and price tags, minimum wage had changed, and so we wanted to update all the information. We were really thorough about it. But then also, I worked very closely with a domestic violence shelter here in Los Angeles to make sure I was getting all of those details crystal clear, very, very accurate on screen because I felt I felt an obligation to teach people because I learned so much from the book.
In terms of bringing that story in, and obviously in terms of the context around the story, how did you ground yourself, in terms of like, did you find those days where like it's a lot when you're faced with so much reality when you're writing that type of story? Um, how did you kind of ground yourself in the writing, or, how did you kind of keep going? Because some of that can be very heavy in terms of writing and transcribing that or putting vision to it.
The answer is I didn't. It was really hard to write, particularly because COVID hit. And then, you know, when we were shooting, I was away from my daughter in Canada in quarantine, and I wasn't sure when I was going to see her again because I was in Canada and she was in America. So the thing that grounded me and made me feel such empathy for Stephanie is, and I am a mom, and the idea of going through all of that with my daughter, that was sort of my North Star. But then to be able to access that emotion and write it during COVID while away from my daughter, I didn't ground myself. I really struggled. It was really, really hard. I had my first panic attack ever, which now happened on the reg. Now our city's on fire all the time. I'm like, oh, here's my panic attack. But I think the answer is none of us were grounded. Shooting during COVID, we were all in a state of trauma. And I think weirdly on a show like Maid, it made us lean into the art. It made us trust each other more. I think that it made the show better. It's a sort of unfortunate silver lining in a weird way. We were all emotional as hell. So yeah.
And with Sirens being much focused on, again, another female protagonist or multiple female protagonists, but also talking about the power and the struggle. It's interesting that you find these pockets of women, and they all ground in some sort of resilience. Is that fair to say?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
You know, your writing really focuses in on a lot of these stories, at least my interpretation is a lot of stories of women who have kind of the world either stacked against them or they're facing some severe internal conflict. As you know, as this as your new piece comes out, is that something that, like, as you're starting to, as you watch things, as you kind of sit back, is that something that you gravitate towards, some very heavy female protagonists, or is that something that, you kind of keep to your writing and then you go off and stay happy over here? Not struggling Friday nights.
It's I my yeah, my life and my marriage are a lot better than a lot of my characters. That's very true. I'm like crazy happily married. We have we do equal parenting. I'm not I'm not in the situation that Alex is in Maid at all. But I will say, I feel like most women, most men too, but in my experience, if you poke a little bit on an airplane at the person next to you, most of us have trauma. Most of us have a darkness. Most of us have a struggle.
Yeah.
Um, I've yet to meet someone, for instance, like I've yet to meet someone in a mom's group who's like got a birth story that has no drama in it at all, or or like a relationship with a mother or sister or father that's not a cycle that they're trying to break. It just I also think now we all have COVID. There's just all of us have trauma. It's everywhere. And so again, I'm just interested in these particular kinds of trauma that I write about for women because I think we inherit so much from our parents, and then it's a crazy time to be a woman anyway. I mean, like everything happening in our country, and there's like, are we even in charge of our uterus anymore? There's so much happening. There's so much trauma that I don't know. I don't. I just find that women really fascinating to write at the moment. I need help. I'm sure they need help too.
We all do. We all do. We all find our commonality with different characters. I just want to go back a little bit, just in terms of your transition from playwright to television. And are you thinking, would you go back to playwriting? Is
Yes,
that something you're
I need.
interested in, or directing, or taking on additional roles?
I am still very much a playwright. I've been a little busy the last few years. But the last play I had go up was in 2018, which feels like 100 years ago. But in playwriting years, it's not that long ago because plays take about 2 years to write, and then you go through the whole rehearsal and staging process. I mean, it's years, not months, that it takes to write a new play. But I am working on a new play right now. What's wonderful is I'm so lucky. I've got terrific relationships with theaters who have all been like, we've liked your shows, but are you going to come back? Like, we're ready for you. And so, um, you know, so it is my favorite kind of writing to do. I love screenwriting, but playwriting it's what I studied. It's what I cut my teeth on. And it's like my secret lover, like whenever I have time to love something else, it's writing a play. I love it.
I'm going to be 100% transparent. I don't know much about playwriting.
Oh,
So, in terms of the process of playwriting, is that different than screenwriting in terms of like the length, as you're saying, it takes longer, things on the. You talk a little bit about the process, just because we
sure.
have our audience is heavily creative. So if they ever want to go into it, I just
Yes.
would love to touch.
The playwriting and screenwriting, while at core, are very similar in that you're writing wonderful, vibrant characters, you're moving story forward. In the core, they're the same thing, but in practice, they're very different. Time is the biggest difference. So when you start writing a play, first of all, you have to pay your rent somehow. Like if you are an extraordinary playwright, um, who gets commissions, and like maybe you get to have a nice life, but there's so few of those playwrights. Most playwrights have to do something else to pay their rent. So they write for TV, they teach, they waitress. I did waitressing for many, many, many years. But so you start writing a play and you're writing it at night and in the morning to work around your day job, but it takes years, and also no one's rushing you because it's like writing a poem for the stage. I mean, 2 years is a healthy amount of time to turn a play in. Um, when you get staffed in a television show, like I did, let's say on Shameless, um, so you start breaking your episode in the room, and 6 weeks later, there's a script. And then within a month after that, you're shooting the script. And then 9 months later, it's being streamed by millions of people. And so it is the velocity is, it makes your head spin when you first do it, like, because you cannot be precious. You have to do your very best work, but you have to do it quickly, and there's not a lot of room for ego, and there's no room for being precious. And playwriting, you can take all the time to be precious you want. Like, I used to spend 2 weeks just designing the playlist I would listen to while writing a play. And screenwriting, you're off on outline a day after you've come up with some of the ideas, so it's fast. But the other main difference is audience. Again, if you have a really successful play, thousands of people are going to see it. If you have a really successful Netflix limited series, like 182 countries are going to see it. So it is the same fundamental job of speaking to an audience, reaching an audience, entertaining an audience, challenging an audience. It's the same job, but um, one is a lot more rigorous.
Did you find that transition to be difficult in terms of working more quickly, going into the writer's room of Shameless, in terms of transitioning?
I did not find it difficult. I found it really fun and freeing. I'd say that the biggest challenge for me with with the switcheroo was that my characters like to talk. I like a monologue. I like to give. I My characters are verbose. My characters on stage are obviously verbose, but on the screen too. Like, I'm not afraid to let a character talk a little bit. And now that I create my own TV shows, everyone talks. That's great. But when I was working on other people's TV shows, sometimes you don't get to put a long monologue in. Sometimes you got to keep the ball moving. So that was a transition. Like, oh, I spent 8 hours on this gorgeous monologue that we're not going to even read. Like, okay, so just the economy was a transition for me. Just you literally can't use that many words. Less is more. But that's a good lesson for writers in general. All writers. That's a good lesson for us across the board. Less is definitely more.
Less is more. 2004. I say it all the time to myself. Well, it's so exciting because I think one of the things, and I think the convergence of, book to screen to theater and, all into stage, all of it is all kind of coming together. And you're actually doing the reverse, which is even cooler. It's like, do you go to a lot of plays at this point? Are you excited about, like, what are you excited about in terms of like what you want to watch or other projects that are out there?
For in theater or in television or in
Oh,
film?
yeah. Like in terms of like the full transition, like when you start looking at this, it's like you have so many projects that are going, whether it's a book to screen to stage, or now it's going for you, it's stage to screen. So it's interesting to see like this convergence happen at this.
Yeah. Well, the answer is yes. I see as much theater as I can. My husband's also a playwright. I mean, now he also does produces and writes as well. But we met in playwriting school, so we go to see everything we can in LA. So we're members of Center Theater, and we go to Mark Cooper, and we go to the symphony, and we do as much as we can. But what was super fun about Sirens is we shot in New York, so I actually got to, like, old school style, go to a ton of theater. And one of our directors on the show, Lila Neugebauer, who I also worked with on Maid, but she's one of the most successful theater directors in town. So I had her giving me recommendations, and I got to see some of her work because it was up while we were there. But what I'm really excited to see next is the Buena Vista Social Club, because my friend wrote the book for it, and it sounds like a fantastic musical. So I'm going to see that when I'm in town. And Brittany, who is in our show, she plays Missy, the kind of grumpy maid. I'm going, or not maid, cleaning lady. I'm going to go see a play that she's in at Lincoln Center in June. So I'm excited to see her on stage.
Gretchen, who couldn't be here today, we talk about it. We're like, we just want to like go into New York completely and just go from play to play to play to play based on what's going on Broadway right now. There's such a resurgence.
Yeah.
So much interest. It's amazing.
Well, you should do that. We should all do that. It's easy when we're in town to work, though.
Log off for multiple hours and just go see everything. I'm going to see Gypsy soon, so I'm very excited.
Oh, that's gonna be good.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see it. So, but Molly, I know we're kind of coming up to time, but it has been a pleasure meeting you. I'm really excited about Sirens, and we will be promoting and cheering you all on the way.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to chat with you, and I'm excited for you to see Sirens too.
Thank you for listening to In Her Words. We hope you'll join us at womeninentertainment.com and go to our Substack for extended interviews and behind the scenes access.